When Mark accompanies his wife Lucy on an exclusive weekend retreat to a private island, he expects luxury and relaxation, not the shattering revelation that his seemingly perfect marriage is a facade. A shocking proposal from their wealthy host reveals Lucy's betrayal, setting Mark on a path of suspicion, investigation, and cold, calculated revenge. As Mark pieces together the truth of Lucy's infidelity, his discoveries go deeper than he ever imagined, forcing him to confront not only her lies but the cracks in their relationship he had long ignored. But just as he takes control of the situation, an unexpected and tragic twist threatens to upend everything, leaving Mark grappling with the irreversible consequences of love, betrayal, and the cost of silence. In this gripping tale of deception and heartbreak, Mark learns that some endings are far more devastating than the betrayals that sparked them. The invitation came in a crisp white envelope embossed with gold lettering, the kind you'd expect for a wedding or a gala. But this wasn't either. It was an exclusive retreat to William Fellowes' private island, a networking opportunity, as our CEO Jack Edwards put it. "It's not just business," Jack had said. "William likes to keep it personal. He's a potential goldmine for our firm, and he's invited you and Lucy. A private jet will pick everyone up Friday morning." I was flattered, though skeptical. My role as IT lead rarely put me in such circles. But Lucy, my wife of 10 years, was ecstatic. She worked directly with William as a client liaison, and it seemed her efforts had paid off. "We're going to an actual island, Mark," she said, twirling her blonde hair around her finger in excitement. "This is huge for us." Us. The word stung a little, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Lucy had been distant lately. There were no fights or glaring issues, but something felt off. Her phone was always on Do Not Disturb, and she'd started dressing more elaborately for work. I chalked it up to career ambition and reminded myself not to overthink. 2 weeks later, the private jet landed on a pristine airstrip that bisected lush, tropical greenery. From the air, the island resembled a crescent moon, its beaches blindingly white against the turquoise waters. As the plane taxied to a halt, Lucy's excitement was contagious. She clutched my arm, her blue eyes sparkling. "This is incredible, isn't it?" "It's something," I replied, giving her a small smile. She didn't seem to notice my hesitation. The group, 4 couples from our firm, along with William and a stunning brunette who appeared to be his date, was greeted with champagne flutes and leis made of real orchids. William, a man who exuded the kind of effortless charisma that made everyone else seem mundane, welcomed us personally. "Make yourselves at home," he said, flashing a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. His handshake was firm, his gaze piercing. When he turned to Lucy, his smile widened. "Lucy, good to see you again." "You too, William," she replied, her voice lilting. The ease with which she said his name, William, felt strange, as if she'd been saying it in her head long before today. The weekend unfolded like a dream. Days were spent snorkeling, kayaking, and indulging in decadent meals. William was the perfect host, ensuring every detail was catered to with precision. He even led group discussions on art and philosophy, his intellect as captivating as his looks. The group was charmed, including me. But something about his interactions with Lucy gnawed at me. Saturday evening brought the most luxurious dinner yet, with an endless array of dishes served on the veranda overlooking the ocean. Lucy wore a red satin dress that clung to her figure, her hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked stunning, though I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her beauty wasn't for me tonight. After dessert, William invited Lucy and me to his study. The room was like something out of a Bond film, mahogany walls, leather furniture, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the bay. William gestured for us to sit, his demeanor suddenly more serious. "I have a personal matter I'd like to discuss," he began, his eyes settling on me. "Mark, you've got a wonderful wife. Smart, capable, beautiful. I've had the pleasure of working closely with her over the past few months." Lucy sat rigid, her hands folded neatly in her lap. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. "I'll cut to the chase," William continued, leaning forward. "I'd like to spend the rest of the weekend with Lucy. Just the two of us. In return, I'm prepared to transfer $100,000 into your account." The air left the room. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I turned to Lucy, expecting her to laugh, to call it absurd. But she was silent, her face flushed. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "It's a genuine offer," William replied smoothly. "And, I believe, a generous one." I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. "Come on, Lucy. We're leaving." She didn't move. "Lucy. I think we should discuss this, Mark," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You think, are you serious?" My voice rose, but I didn't care. "You're actually considering this?" "It's just a weekend," she said, her tone defensive. "It doesn't mean anything." The words felt like a slap. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, was slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. "I won't be a part of this," I said, turning to leave. "If you want to stay, stay. But you're on your own." As I stormed out of the room, my chest felt tight, my vision blurred with rage and disbelief. On the way back to our room, I passed the others, their laughter and light-heartedness a cruel contrast to the storm raging inside me. Lucy didn't return that night. I sat awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head. The betrayal was raw, but the worst part was the uncertainty. I didn't know if I hated her, or if I hated myself for still loving her. Morning came, and with it, Lucy's return. She looked disheveled but defiant, as if daring me to challenge her. "We need to talk," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. But I didn't respond. I couldn't trust myself to speak without exploding. The rest of the weekend passed in silence. By Monday, we were back on the jet, the island shrinking into the distance. But the real distance was between us, an invisible chasm that had formed, and I knew it would only grow wider. The ride home from the airport was heavy with silence. Lucy stared out the window, her face unreadable. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every word I wanted to say caught in my throat, choking me with its weight. My thoughts raced between fury and disbelief. How could she have even entertained such a proposal? When we finally pulled into the driveway, the familiarity of home felt alien. Our renovated house, the one we'd worked so hard to transform together, seemed to mock me. The cozy, warm life we'd built was a facade, and now the cracks were showing. Lucy broke the silence first. "We can't keep ignoring this, Mark. We have to talk." "Talk?" I laughed bitterly. "Sure, let's talk. Why don't you start by explaining why you didn't walk out of that room with me?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "It wasn't what it seemed." "Oh, really?" "Because it seemed like you were perfectly okay with selling yourself for a weekend." "It wasn't about the money," she snapped, her voice rising for the first time. I don't know what it was. It just happened." I stepped closer, anger boiling to the surface. "You don't know. That's your answer. You don't know." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I was too far gone to feel pity. "You humiliated me, Lucy. You didn't even defend us. You just sat there." "I didn't know what to do," she shouted back. William is." "Don't," I cut her off, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't try to justify this." She wiped her eyes, her breath shaky. "I made a mistake. I admit that. But nothing happened." I scoffed, shaking my head. "Nothing happened this time. What about before? How long has this been going on?" Her silence answered the question for me. I felt the ground beneath me shift, the certainty of my world collapsing into a void. I turned and walked toward the stairs. "Mark, please," she called after me, her voice breaking. "We can fix this. We can figure it out." I paused, my hand on the banister. "Without looking back," I said, "I'm not sure there's anything left to fix." Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in work. Every morning, I left the house before Lucy was awake and returned late, sometimes long after the kids were asleep. Avoidance became my armor. But no matter how much I distracted myself, the doubt festered. The turning point came one night when I couldn't sleep. I found myself pacing the kitchen, replaying the events on the island. My mind kept returning to Lucy's phone. She was fiercely protective of it, always keeping it close, never leaving it unattended. It was unlike her, or maybe it was, and I just never noticed. I waited until she fell asleep. Her phone lay on the nightstand, face down, charging. My heart pounded as I picked it up, my fingers trembling. The screen was locked, but I knew her password, our anniversary. The messages were innocuous at first, mostly from friends and colleagues. But then I saw a name that stopped me cold, William. I opened the thread, and my stomach dropped. The messages were casual but intimate, inside jokes, shared memories of their meetings. The words blurred as I scrolled, my hands shaking with rage. She'd lied. She'd lied about everything. At the bottom of the thread was a message that confirmed my worst fears: last weekend was incredible. I can't stop thinking about it. Let's make it happen again soon. I set the phone down carefully, afraid of waking her. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her sleeping form. How could she lie next to me every night, pretending everything was fine? How could she look at me, knowing what she'd done? The next morning, I made a decision. Confronting her wasn't enough. She'd betrayed me, not just with her actions but with her deceit. I needed proof, something irrefutable. I started small, checking her emails and bank statements. The patterns were subtle but there: unexplained transactions, last-minute work trips, and receipts from places she'd never mentioned. It wasn't enough to confront her yet, but it was a start. The breakthrough came a week later. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, something discreet she wouldn't notice. It was risky, but I was past the point of caring about ethics. I needed to know the truth. It didn't take long for the tracker to pay off. One Thursday afternoon, while I was supposed to be at work, the tracker pinged an unfamiliar address, a boutique hotel on the other side of town. My hands shook as I followed the signal, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. I parked across the street, my heart pounding in my ears. Her car was there, in plain sight. I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Minutes passed like hours until I saw her emerge from the hotel. She wasn't alone. William was with her. They laughed as they walked to her car, their bodies too close, their movements too familiar. My vision tunneled as rage coursed through me. But I didn't move. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I snapped photos with my phone, evidence. Cold, hard proof. Then I drove away, my mind racing with possibilities. Confrontation? Divorce? Revenge? The options swirled in my head like a storm, each more tempting than the last. By the time I got home, I had a plan. It wasn't just about ending things. It was about making sure she understood the depth of her betrayal. And more than that, it was about ensuring I came out of this intact, emotionally, financially, and legally. I wouldn't just confront her. I would destroy her lies, her excuses, her entire facade. She had built her betrayal piece by piece, and now I would dismantle it, brick by brick. It's strange how quickly rage can turn into cold, calculated determination. By the time I woke up the next morning, the anger had receded, leaving behind a sharp clarity. I wasn't going to confront Lucy, not yet. I needed to ensure that when I did, there would be no room for denial, no escape. I spent the day putting my plan into motion. First, I backed up all the evidence I had gathered, the texts, the tracker logs, the photos. I saved them to a secure cloud storage account, one Lucy couldn't access. Then I contacted a private investigator. If I wanted to nail her lies once and for all, I needed a professional. The PI, a no-nonsense woman named Ellen, listened without judgment as I laid out my suspicions. Infidelity cases are pretty straightforward, she said. We'll track her movements, document her interactions, and compile everything into a comprehensive report. How long will it take? I asked. That depends on her behavior, Ellen replied. If she's as careless as you say, we'll have enough within a week or two. I nodded, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. For once, the waiting didn't bother me. I wanted this done right. Over the next 10 days, life at home became a surreal charade. Lucy acted as if nothing had changed, though she seemed more cautious around me. Perhaps she sensed my distance or suspected something was amiss. She still spent her evenings glued to her phone, her laughter grating on my nerves every time a message came through. I bit my tongue and played along, masking my disdain with indifference. The kids were my anchor during that time. Emma, our 13-year-old, had a school play coming up, and Daniel, 11, was gearing up for a soccer tournament. I threw myself into their activities, determined to shield them from the storm brewing beneath the surface. If nothing else, they deserved a father who was present, even if their mother was anything but. Ellen sent me periodic updates, each one tightening the noose around Lucy's deceit. She captured photos of Lucy meeting William at discreet locations, a cafe, a park, and once, at his office after hours. The final piece of evidence came on a Friday night when Lucy told me she was working late. Ellen's report showed otherwise. Lucy and William had checked into a hotel together and stayed overnight. It was the smoking gun I needed. The following morning, I called a lawyer. Divorce wasn't just a possibility now, it was inevitable. My attorney, a sharp-tongued man named Robert, reviewed the evidence and nodded approvingly. This is solid, he said. Judges don't take kindly to infidelity, especially when there's this much proof. We'll push for primary custody of the kids, the house, and a favorable financial settlement. What about Lucy? I asked. What happens to her? Robert gave me a wry smile. She'll get what's fair, but she won't be walking away with much, if that's what you're worried about. It wasn't just about the settlement. I wanted Lucy to feel the weight of her choices, to understand the destruction she'd wrought. But I knew the legal route would only go so far. I needed something more personal. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, Lucy suggested a family dinner. It was her attempt at normalcy, a way to smooth over the growing tension between us. I agreed, deciding it was time to set my plan into motion. We sat around the table, the kids chattering about their day. Lucy played the part of the doting mother perfectly, laughing at their jokes and asking about their activities. But I could see the cracks in her facade, the way her eyes darted toward her phone, the subtle tension in her smile. Lucy, I said casually, setting down my fork. I need to talk to you after dinner. She froze for a fraction of a second before recovering. Of course. Is everything okay? Just some things we need to clear up, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The kids didn't seem to notice the undercurrent in our exchange, and I was grateful for that. After dinner, I sent them upstairs to do their homework. Lucy lingered in the kitchen, washing dishes with deliberate care, as if stalling for time. When she finally joined me in the living room, I was ready. I had the evidence folder on the coffee table, the photos and reports meticulously organized. What's this? She asked, her voice wary. I gestured for her to sit. Go ahead. Take a look. She hesitated but complied, opening the folder with trembling hands. As she flipped through the pages, her face turned ashen. The photos of her and William, the hotel receipts, the tracker logs, it was all there, laid bare. "Mark," her voice was barely a whisper. "I can explain." I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. "No, Lucy. You can't. You lied to me, to our kids, to everyone. You betrayed our marriage. Explain that." Tears welled in her eyes as she fumbled for words. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything. It just happened. I didn't think." "Exactly," I cut her off. "You didn't think. Or maybe you did, and you just didn't care." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mark. I made a mistake. I know I messed up, but please, please don't do this." "Do what, Lucy?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Hold you accountable. Protect our kids from this mess. You did this, not me." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. The image of her laughing with William, her ease in deceiving me, was burned into my mind. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I said, standing up. "The papers will be filed next week. I'll be seeking full custody of the kids and the house." "Mark, please," she begged, clutching at my arm. "We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I pulled away, my resolve unshaken. "You should have thought of that before. This is over, Lucy." Her cries followed me as I walked upstairs, closing the door behind me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was the only one left. The weeks following our confrontation were a blur of legal proceedings, stilted conversations, and whispered reassurances to the kids. Lucy moved into the guest room, her presence in the house a painful reminder of what we'd lost. She tried to make amends, cleaning, cooking, even attending family therapy, but her efforts felt hollow. I kept my distance, burying myself in work and the children's lives. The divorce papers were filed, and my lawyer assured me that the case was airtight. Full custody of the kids, the house, and a financial settlement that would leave Lucy with little more than her belongings. I should have felt victorious, but I didn't. At night, when the house was silent, the weight of what had happened pressed down on me. My family, the one thing I'd fought so hard to protect, was shattered. One Friday evening, I came home late from work. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of music drifting from the kitchen. I assumed Lucy had gone to bed, she often did before I returned, but as I stepped inside, I noticed a faint glow under the kitchen door. Pushing it open, I found Lucy sitting at the table, a half-empty bottle of wine in front of her. She looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "You're late," she said, her voice flat. "I had work," I replied, unsure of where this was going. "What are you doing up?" She shrugged, swirling the wine in her glass. "Thinking. Reflecting. Whatever you want to call it." I hesitated, the tension between us palpable. "Lucy, you shouldn't be drinking." "The kids. They're asleep," she interrupted. "Don't worry. I'm not completely useless." Her words stung, but I kept my composure. "What do you want, Lucy?" She stared at me for a long moment, her gaze unreadable. "I want to know if there's any part of you that still loves me." The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to answer but hesitated. Did I? Could I? "I don't know," I admitted finally. "After everything you've done, it's hard to feel anything but hurt." Her eyes filled with tears, and she laughed bitterly. "That's what I thought." I stepped closer, softening my tone. "Lucy, this isn't easy for me either. But you made your choice." She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. "Do you know why I did it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Because you wanted something more, I said, the bitterness creeping back in. Because I wasn't enough. She shook her head, her tears falling freely now. No, Mark. Because I was afraid. Afraid of getting old, of losing myself, of becoming invisible. William made me feel seen, even if it was wrong. I'm not excusing it, but I need you to understand, I wasn't trying to hurt you. Her words cut deeper than I expected. For a moment, I saw her not as my betrayer but as the woman I'd fallen in love with, a woman who had made terrible choices but was still human. I wish you'd told me, I said softly. Maybe we could have fixed it before it came to this. She gave me a sad smile. Maybe. But it's too late now, isn't it? I nodded, unable to argue. The next morning, the kids and I went to a soccer game. Lucy stayed behind, saying she wasn't feeling well. I didn't press her. When we returned in the afternoon, the house was eerily quiet. The kids ran upstairs, laughing and chatting, while I headed to the guest room to check on her. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open. At first, nothing seemed amiss. The bed was made, the room tidy. But then I noticed the note on the nightstand, my name scrawled across the envelope. My heart sank as I opened it, reading her words in a shaky script. Mark. I've tried to make amends, but I know it's not enough. I've broken something that can't be repaired, and I can't bear to see the pain I've caused you and the kids anymore. You deserve a life without the weight of my mistakes dragging you down. Please take care of them. Tell them I love them more than anything. And, Mark. I'm sorry. For everything. Lucy. Panic surged through me as I dropped the note and rushed through the house, calling her name. She wasn't in the kitchen or the living room. Not in the bathroom or the backyard. I ran to the garage, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it. The car was still running, the exhaust fumes thick in the air. She was slumped in the driver's seat, her head resting against the window, her face peaceful in a way that shattered me. Lucy! I screamed, yanking the door open and dragging her out. The acrid smell of gasoline filled my lungs as I carried her into the fresh air, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I called 911, my voice frantic, begging them to hurry. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it felt like an eternity. They worked tirelessly, performing CPR and administering oxygen, but I knew. Deep down, I knew. Hours later, I sat in the hospital waiting room, the kids asleep beside me, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding. A doctor approached, his expression solemn, and my world collapsed. I'm sorry, he said. We did everything we could. The funeral was small, attended only by close friends and family. I stood at the graveside, holding Emma and Daniel's hands as we said our final goodbyes. The weight of Lucy's loss pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. In the end, it wasn't the betrayal that broke us. It was the silence, the fear, the inability to bridge the chasm between us. Lucy was gone, and with her, any chance of closure. As I walked away from the grave, my heart heavy with regret, I realized that forgiveness comes too late when the words are left unspoken.